After Ebola, the Zika disease is affecting most countries in the world today, especially in Latin America. It reminds us of the dangers facing the world, especially when it comes to the area of infectious diseases. My guest today is from Germany and teaches at Münster University, the fourth largest in Germany, and has been a professor since 1992 with over 300 publications in the world of medical biology and infectious disease research. Professor Georg Peters talks to me on the necessity to spend so much in funding on research which has to do with curbing neglected tropical diseases and infectious diseases across the world. Professor Georg Peters, welcome to GlobeWatch.
Thank you.
The World Health Organization said that Ebola took the world by surprise, and after battling Ebola, were we supposed to be surprised by Zika too?
We shouldn't be surprised. We should expect that infectious diseases, emerging infectious diseases, get more and more importance. There are several reasons for that. Climate change, mainly introduced by the industrial countries, as you know, and all this, as well as worldwide tourism and other reasons, are working hardly on that we get more and more confronted with new infectious diseases.
Just how dangerous are infectious diseases to the global health system today? Take, for example, the case of Zika, which of course had been creating a lot of problems for the Rio 2016 Games in Brazil.
That's correct. As you may know, the Zika virus originally came from Central Africa in the mid of the last century. There has it been described first, but then went out first to Southeast Asia and to Latin America, and undiscovered so far, and then came up some years ago in Latin America, American countries, especially in Brazil, with giving the possible association with the syndrome of microcephaly in newborns, but also with some cerebral problems, lumbar cerebral problems, also to adults. Otherwise, this disease is not very dangerous for adults, and you develop immunity.
You are very much aware that Ebola started probably in Central Africa too, many years ago, probably 1976. You are very much aware, equally like you said, that Zika started somewhere in Central Africa many years ago. But why have we been unable to preempt their resurgence? Where is the missing line?
Well, the missing line is first that also the World Health Organization and also the industrialized developed countries were something neglecting the possibility, what they should have known by their own history, like plague epidemics in the medieval times, that infectious diseases are very important, and that we have to be prepared. And the world, the global world, has to fight this, and not only single countries. And it was a very big mistake of the World Health Organization to underestimate the problem of Ebola in the 3 West African countries.
You have repeatedly used the expression infectious diseases. Can you categorize them? What are they actually?
Well, infectious diseases covers a very broad spectrum of diseases, and the common theme is that there is an agent, normally a virus or a bacterium or a fungus or a parasite, which can then introduce what we call an infectious disease in man. And they are very different, and thus the spectrum.
Such as, which are
Well,
the most
viral
common
diseases like Ebola, or you mentioned and asked for Zika, but there can be bacterial diseases like due to mycobacteria, tuberculosis, or meningococci, encephalitis, meningitis. But there can be parasites, and especially in the tropical area of our world, there are several parasitic diseases. The main and very important example is malaria.
You are very much aware that the world is challenged by so many problems. Is funding a key element in enabling research in doing what is needed by the global community in the world of combating these infectious diseases across the world?
You are absolutely right. What is importantly warranted is basic research, because basic research in infectious diseases leads to the situation that we are able to fight infectious diseases. And if you look at very other examples like smallpox or poliomyelitis, basic research has then led that 20, 30, 40 years after that result in basic research, you are able to fight these infectious diseases. And therefore, it's so important that you increase basic research, and especially also in the so-called still underdeveloped world, and especially also in Africa.
Okay, you are not just a professor at Stark University in Germany. You are not only an expert in medical biology and a well-grounded figure in infectious diseases world. You are equally a member of the Senate of DFG, which is a German funding research globally. Tell me, what have you been doing in particular in that area to inject cash and train human resources in turning things around?
So the German Research Foundation is the main foundation in Germany supporting for the government and paid by the government basic research in every field, but also in infectious diseases.
This has been existing for some 4 decades now.
Yeah, well, this is since the end of the
about
Second World
80
War.
years.
Yeah, and then about 8 years ago, the DFG has decided to make a combined program together with African countries to make combined efforts and projects by German researchers as well as African researchers to start to make particular projects in infectious diseases with 2 aims. First, to make basic research in still under-discovered areas, and to increase what we call capacity building and training of young African researchers. And this has been on roll already since 7 years, and it is, as we believe, a really success. A lot of money has gone here into African research, and especially in training of young African researchers. And we can see now, even after 7 years of doing this, that the first people who started as young, let's say master or PhD students, are now already in really academic high positions like professors, leading institutes, or are in the middle stage. And thus we are very happy that we started this, and we for sure will continue this.
Oh, you just said that you continue this. What kind of translational impact has this had on local communities and in the health sector in particular? Because all what you are doing is improving people's life and reducing health risk.
Well, what we are doing is support basic research, which then is to be translated into public health.
In terms of stats, like in figures and numbers and percentages,
okay.
How can you rate your success story?
Okay, so within the 7 years, in this, let's say, still small program, we have now put in 40 million euros, and more than 50% of that, that means more than 20 million euros, within the 7 years now have been invested in Africa, in people, in young researchers, but also about nearly 2 million out of this has gone into modern research equipment, high technical stuff, and we have a number, we have to be careful, about 180 to 100 PhD students have been, African PhD students have been involved in this program already.
You know, you are talking about networking with African countries to foster collaboration in the domain of sustaining the healthcare system, which in most countries is simply broken, as you noticed in Liberia, Guinea, when Ebola surfaced. Which are the key countries in which you are paying particular attention? Because I'm sure that you have less impact or focus in Northern Africa as compared to Sub-Saharan Africa.
This is correct. The main of the program is going with Sub-Saharan Africa because you have there more of the spectrum of infectious diseases of this type. But also to work with the people is, let's say, more fruitful in our experience so far. You mentioned one point. It is very important that what we have seen with the Ebola story in the 3 West African countries, that there are 2 things important. The first is, and the world has to take care for this. First, to improve the general medical health system in broad, so that everybody in these African countries has access to normal medical treatment, diagnostics, and so forth. This takes time, of course. You cannot do this in 5 years. In the industrialized country, in my country, in Germany, it took nearly a century to come from a very poor situation, the change from the 19th to the 20th century, and then it started. And just, let's say, after the end of the Second World War, we could say we have a very good, broad medical system. And then second, to improve research, basic research and translational research, which then leads to really new instruments to fight infectious diseases. And also for this translational time, we have to be patient. We cannot expect that within basic research, if you have a project funded for 3 years, for 6 years, that after that immediately you have a new drug or a new diagnostic method. It may take another 20 years that your project results together with others then leads to a real translational instrument.
Okay, you are very much aware that the outside image or picture of Germany is that this is a country noted as one of such where its citizens are not ready to give their taxpayers money for external ventures. And I just wonder, as a member of the funding Senate, how you succeed in convincing German funding agencies to inject cash for research in Africa?
Well, actually, I must say that our former president, Köhler, but also more and more our government, and especially now our Chancellor Merkel, who led the G7 summit last year and the G20 summit, and she is a physicist. She has on her program now to force the European Union as well as the WHO to increase more engagement by personal resources, but also to send experts, but also, or get people over for training, but also with money to enable the countries in Africa, in Latin America, in parts of Southeast Asia to improve themselves. And secondly, to create a kind of emergency task force if such a crisis like Ebola, but also perhaps the swine influenza pandemic some years ago, that then the WHO has an instrument to immediately start a combined action to help the people where the outbreak is, let's say like with Ebola in Africa, but also then to protect for or prevent that there is a bigger global epidemic arising. So by telling the people that today global means not only global financial stuff, global economy, you cannot stay anymore as your tiny country. Also not, Germany is a very tiny country. The time is over. You are embedded in the whole global network, and the same is true for infectious diseases.
Okay, you are very much aware that each time infectious diseases occur, their impact is large scale and trans-border. Apart from funding, which other area is key in reducing their large scale impact? You know the number of people who died of Ebola, and you know the long-standing effects of Zika on mothers and babies.
Many diseases, but especially infectious diseases, have a very strong association with ecological, climate, but also social economic situations. Just an example, Europe. That tuberculosis itself in, let's say, continental Europe doesn't play a role anymore within the countries. We get now some by immigrants from the east, eastern countries and so forth, also from immigrants from other countries. But the fight for tuberculosis to get it really reduced was not because of the major effect, not because of antibiotics, not because of the vaccine, which has been anyway not very of value, but the improvement of the general social economic situation, clean water, warm, clean rooms, good food, safe food, enough food, regular working times, improvement of the medical system. So we have the law pause for this already, and therefore it is very important to invest money, a lot of money, in the development in a smart way that the so-called underdeveloped countries or low-developed countries then make their own improvement, are able to do this.
You just spoke about investment. When you look at the amount of global financial resources allocated to combating and eliminating diseases like HIV and AIDS, like malaria, like tuberculosis, do you think that infectious diseases are neglected, although some of them may be part of that group?
Well, it seems to be like HIV, also tuberculosis, malaria is very popular. Everybody also in Germany knows about HIV, knows about malaria, and that there are parts in the world, like in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, they are very prominent, and to say this, are still killing people and decreasing properties and so forth. And therefore that it's important, and there is money put in, but this is not enough. I mean, to put in money in programs for HIV or something like that, it is very good, but the main thing, coming back to that, is that at the same time we have to invest money from the whole world to get the normal life supported and the normal health a normal health system established.
Where should much of that investment go? In the training of human resource capacity to reduce the large gap existing between the patient-doctor ratio or patient-specialist ratio?
Okay, so I have to restrict myself a little bit to what I'm, let's say, expert in. I know a lot of infectious diseases and funding of this and basic research. But I, as a normal, let's say, civil human, I know that there is much more, which is important. You are addressing that. So from our standpoint, when we advise, so as expert, our government, we tell them that especially infectious diseases and all the circumstances for this, that is a main field to invest in, to do two things: to protect the people here, but also to protect your own people in the future. And if there is a major threat in the future, then it will be climate change and the emergence of new infectious diseases. It will not be possibly a tsunami.
You have insisted so much on the point of climate change. Where is the link between climate change and infectious diseases, for example?
Yeah, okay. Just give a very rough example. If the predictions are true that the climate is increasing in the next 30 years, let's say 4 to 5 degrees centigrade in continental Europe, then 20, 50 years later, or even quicker, we will also sleep under mosquito nets in Germany, in South Wales. That's an example what climate change means.
DFG has been networking with African countries for roughly a decade now to expand research in many areas. What are the current projects and how do you intend to get results from them?
Okay, so a basic rule in funding by DFG is the excellence of the project proposals. So we do not tell them we want to have 4 projects on malaria, 2 on trypanosomiasis or something like that. We just say, okay, send your proposal, make your group of people combined with researchers in Germany and give the proposal, and then this is going to a review committee, and if the proposal is excellent, then is funded. So that means that we have no influence on the topics which are there at the time, but I can tell at the time what I oversee now with the projects, and if you talk to the DFG people here and see during the conference what topics have been on, it is really covering a broad spectrum. Of course, all the neglected, so-called neglected tropical diseases, sleeping sickness and something like that, or all this which is predominantly still here in these climatical and geographic regions, that is also a main focus, which is of course not of that interest in continental Europe because we don't have this. But the spectrum so is very broad, and also what we call normal infectious diseases. If you get a wound infected, for instance, my bug I'm working with as a researcher, a staphylococcal disease, you can die within 2-3 days, and maybe in remote areas, and that are we looking for. Okay. It could be that they even do not get to a point where they get medical help. Okay,
you just said that you don't control the conception of the projects. Yeah. They do them on independent basis, sent to Germany. They are evaluated, and then their importance seen and then funded. But you know, he who has the cash finally controls the entire process. My question is, how do you follow up to make sure that these projects which have been funded are not scant projects, that they are real?
Yeah, this is a very important question. By the way, not only in funding into African German projects, but also in German projects. It is very mandatory, especially for the government who gives the money to tell them that we are doing the right thing and that we can harvest from the investment, the scientific investment. There is always a risk that this is science.
So how do you control them to know that these projects are effective and that they are having societal impact on the people? That
normally,
is my question.
the strongest instrument we have is normally a scientific project has to go over, let's say, at least 6 to 8 years. And we don't fund this whole period at the beginning, but we have 3 years terms, okay? 2 or 3 years terms. And then you have to come with a follow-up proposal. And then you have to show what you have performed and accomplished so far. So publication, getting other funding from your own country, and you can then read what they have done because it's published, and you know if it's, let's say, published in a very high-ranked journal, then you know that the international community recognizes this as, wow, there has been a good result.
Professor Georg Peters from Munster University in Germany, I'm afraid we have to end here. Thank you very much indeed for being a guest on Global Watch.
Thank you for listening to me.
You're welcome.
Okay.